Chapter 1. December 2018. Lauren Romriel stood behind a random stranger whom she'd just spent 4 years in school with. Or she assumed she had at least. They were both in their caps and gowns, ready to walk across the stage for their college graduation. She was both elated and sad, thrilled that college with its party mentality was finally over, and sad that she had no idea what she wanted to do with her life. She was 22. Who didn't know what they wanted from life at 22? She fidgeted, wondering why anyone was celebrating her that day, but her parents and all 4 of her sisters were in the audience, and they'd all made it clear they loved her and were thrilled to be there. She sighed, wishing there was somewhere to run to. Lauren hadn't been able to handle another year of school, and she was nowhere close to a degree because she'd floated around so much, so she'd gone to her advisor in the spring, who had suggested she get her degree in liberal arts. It would only take another 15 hours of classes, and she'd done it. But what good was graduating when you were adrift at sea, knowing less about where you were going than a toddler along for the ride in a minivan? She shook her long brown hair, looking all around her. Finally, she poked the random stranger in front of her in the back. "Hi. I know we haven't met, but do you have any idea what you're going to be when you grow up?" The girl nodded. "I got accepted to medical school for the spring, and I'm going to be a heart surgeon." "Why?" Lauren shook her head, looking down at her feet. "No reason." After a moment, she turned to see who was behind her. It was a guy she didn't know. She looked at him. "What are you going to be when you grow up?" "A lemming in my father's company. I'm not looking forward to it, but when I take over, it'll all be worth it." The guy shrugged. "What about you?" "I'm going to be a drama queen." "Well, I already kind of am, but I think that's the perfect career for me." Lauren turned back around to face front, fighting the tears that wanted to fall. Her sisters all had dreams. The random people she'd pulled in line at graduation both had dreams. Why didn't she have dreams? What was wrong with her? She moved forward in the line until her name was called, and then she walked across the stage to catcalls and cheers from family and friends. She didn't deserve them though. What good was a liberal arts degree when you had no plans to do something with it? After the ceremony, which went on forever, Lauren met up with her family at the house she'd grown up in. She was hugged repeatedly by so many people who had come to the ceremony and to her graduation party. When the party was finally over, she was relieved. It didn't feel right for people to be celebrating her. Alyssa, her oldest sister, found her sitting alone on the steps, wishing the rest of the world would disappear. "Why were you looking so sad?" Alyssa was on one of her perpetual diets, and she had carrot sticks in her hand instead of some of the delicious food their mother had prepared for the celebration. Lauren shrugged. "I don't know why everyone is celebrating me. Do you know I have no idea what I want to be when I grow up?" "That's okay. You'll think of something. I could use an assistant if you want to come work for me in the meantime. It wouldn't have to be permanent if you didn't want to keep doing it." Lauren shrugged. "Real estate doesn't even sound a little bit appealing. I'd rather do something exciting." "Like what?" Alyssa asked. "If only I knew." Lauren sighed. "I'm going to go get another plate of Mom's delicious food, and then I'm going to go bury myself in the backyard. It won't be easy getting through all the snow to get to the ground. I guess burying myself in snow won't have quite the same effect, will it? Maybe I can turn myself into a snow woman. Do you think anyone would miss me?" Alyssa shrugged before nodding. "Well, the special dinner Mom made is for you. If the guest of honor goes missing, no one will know what to think. I guess I need to stay then, don't I?" Lauren took a deep breath and headed for the kitchen where all the food was. "You'll still love me even if I don't figure out what I want to be, won't you?" "Of course, I will. How could I stop loving you?" Alyssa hugged her, and Lauren felt a carrot stick poke her in the back. Get something real to eat. You need food, Lauren said as she disappeared into the kitchen, worried that her already too thin sister was going to starve herself to death. She fixed herself a plate of all of her favorites, which were left from the party, wishing she could cook like her mother could. Of course, she'd never let her mother teach her, and she'd never tried to be a good cook, but what did that matter? She still wished she was as good as her mom. Maybe they could spend some time working on cooking now that Lauren would be living at home as she looked for a job. Her first real job. What was she going to do with her life? She helped clean up from the party before she found her mother, who was working on putting last-minute touches on a cake for their dessert. I need you to teach me to cook, Mom. I've been trying to get you to let me teach you since you were 10. Why the change in attitude? Lauren felt tears pop into her eyes. Because I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I feel like a fraud. Everyone I went to school with has all these dreams, and I have a degree in liberal arts. What am I supposed to do with that? As usual, Elizabeth Romriel knew just what to say. You'll find your dream, Lauren. All of my girls have found their dreams when they least expected to. Alyssa had no intentions of being a real estate agent. Taylor never dreamed she'd be running a hotel, and Amanda planned to be a famous artist, and now she's doing interior design. The only one of you who knew what she wanted to do from the time she was little was Kayla, and I think most of her decision was made when she realized she didn't have to dress up every day. Lauren laughed. The sister closest to her in age, Kayla, flipped houses for a living. I guess you're right about Kayla. She's so much happier in jeans with holes in them and an old worn-out t-shirt than any of the rest of us would dream of being. Elizabeth opened the oven and pulled out a cookie sheet covered with Lauren's favorite cookies. Chocolate chip. Now, go pour yourself some milk, and I'll feed you some of these cookies. No one else needs to know I made them. As soon as her mother set the pan down, Lauren threw her arms around her. You're the best mother in all of Utah. Of course, I am. That's why I have 5 wonderful girls who make me so proud. Even my youngest, who has yet to find her dreams. Elizabeth looked up as her husband, Dwight, walked into the room, and Lauren felt a pang in her chest. The look her mother always gave her father made her wonder if she would ever feel that much for anyone. Dwight smiled down at his youngest. You did it. I was sure you'd drop out 2 weeks before graduation, but you made it through. Want to come work for me? I need a new receptionist. Lauren wrinkled her nose. I'm not sure being a receptionist is my dream. He laughed, his deep-voiced chuckles filling up the kitchen. Well, you just stay here with your mom and me until you do find your dream. Whatever it is, you know we support you. Lauren bit her tongue against a saucy retort. If it had been anyone other than her father who had said that, she'd have made a joke about spinning on a pole in her underwear, but she knew her dad wouldn't be amused. Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you and Mom here to support me. You're never going to have to find out. He hugged her close before watching her pour herself milk and grab a plate of cookies. Aren't you supposed to be helping your sisters clean up? I did my share, and if I helped more, I'd have to share my cookies, and Mom made them for me. Lauren responded, her mouth so full of cookies she was barely intelligible. Her mother shook her head. Dwight, I promise you I did my best to teach them all manners. They mostly stuck. Lauren swallowed her cookie and chased it down with milk before responding. I have manners. When I want to. With that, she went back to her cookies, happy to have her parents on her side. Amanda was the next to wander into the kitchen. Fresh chocolate chip cookies for me? You shouldn't have, Mom. She hurried to get a plate and a glass of milk, plopping down on the chair next to Lauren's. She made them for me. I'm the one who graduated. Amanda said, already breaking her cookie in half and taking a big bite. Sure, she did. Elizabeth shook her head. Do none of you girls have any manners? Not where chocolate chip cookies are concerned, Lauren said, sticking another cookie into her mouth. We should get Alyssa in here and force-feed her some cookies. Like a full dozen. She gets skinnier every time I see her. I know, their mother said softly. I worry she's becoming anorexic. We all do, Amanda answered softly. She says she still eats Junior mints like they're going out of style, but I haven't seen it. Taylor wandered into the kitchen then, sniffing deeply. I can't believe you started without me, she said, putting her hands on her hips and glaring at her sisters. One would think you girls had never seen cookies before, when I know very well, I bake them often, and I make sure you all get them. Elizabeth said, shaking her head. Lauren simply said, cookies, and reapplied herself to the task at hand. When Kayla and Alyssa wandered in, she groaned. They're all for me. Kayla laughed. Sure, they are. She already had 5 cookies on a plate. Thank you for your amazing metabolism, Mom. I love being able to eat whatever I want. She plopped down at the table on the other side of Lauren and took a swig of her sister's milk. Hey, that's mine. Lauren complained, glaring at Kayla. I'm sharing your cookies, so I might as well share your milk. Besides, you never finish a glass of milk. I've known you for 22 years, and I know for a fact that you always pour yourself a big glass, and you never drink more than half. I'm helping. Kayla grinned at their mother. Thanks for making cookies. Anytime. Elizabeth was obviously thrilled to have all of her daughters in one place for a celebration. Alyssa looked at the cookies and frowned. I shouldn't have any. I had a box of Junior mints earlier, and I don't mean one of the little ones. Lauren exchanged glances with the other sisters. I think you should have at least 2. I'll even give you one of mine. You can have one of mine too, Kayla, Amanda, and Taylor said together. Alyssa laughed. There are 2 left. I can have those. She went to the refrigerator and poured herself a glass of milk. I shouldn't, but I've never been able to resist Mom's cookies. She moved to the table with her 4 sisters, raising her glass of milk to toast. To Lauren, the sweetest liberal arts major in all of Utah. The others raised their glasses to clink them against hers, and when Lauren looked over at Kayla with a superior smile, because Kayla hadn't bothered to get her own glass, she saw that Kayla was using her fist to toast. Lauren was just happy it wasn't a hammer. Chapter 2. June 2019. Lauren woke with a faint smile on her face. Alyssa had gotten engaged to the most wonderful man the night before, and they were all thrilled for her. And Lauren was going to cook for the reception. She'd worked with her mother right up until her death, and then she'd taken off on her own. She was enjoying cooking in a way she had never thought she would, but she didn't want to do it for a living. Well, not forever anyway. Now that they were opening a band bee in their family's lake house in Richland, Idaho, she was putting her cooking skills to use to earn her keep. What else was she going to do with a liberal arts degree? She quickly showered and dressed, thrilled to be up before the rest of the house. All of her sisters, except Kayla, were living under the same roof with her, and it was nice to just feel like a family again. Kayla would be joining them as soon as she finished the house she was working on, and they would have time together then. Lauren went to the kitchen, determined to try a new breakfast casserole recipe before her sisters woke up. She had something in mind that sounded absolutely amazing to her, and she was sure the others would like it just as well. As she cooked, her sisters and Nick, her future brother-in-law, popped in and out of the kitchen to talk to her. When the casserole was ready, she used the intercom to let everyone know it was time to eat. As her sisters gathered to eat together, she frowned. This wouldn't last much longer. Alyssa and Nick would be off doing their own thing soon, and it would just be the four of them left. Well, if Kayla ever got there. She had experienced so much trouble with the house she was working on that it felt like it would never happen. As they ate, they all laughed and talked about the wedding. Nick didn't seem to want to help much with the planning. "I'm just going to show up," he said. Alyssa glared at him. "If you weren't so perfect every other way, I might have to get mad at you for saying that. But you love me too much to be mad at me, right?" Nick leaned over and kissed Alyssa, and Lauren couldn't help but make gagging sounds. She knew it was childish, but at the moment, she just didn't care. "Get a room, people," Lauren said, shaking her head. Alyssa rolled her eyes. "Don't be a brat." Lauren was quiet after that. As the youngest, she had a reputation for being a brat, and she wanted to grow out of that. "I'm going to make a Thanksgiving casserole for supper. It's a recipe I found, and it sounds delicious." Taylor nodded. "I'm in. You know I'll eat anything you want to cook." "I'm not sure if it's because I'm that good or because you hate cooking that much," Lauren said with a grin. "Yes," Taylor responded. Amanda shook her head. "You're really good, Lauren. I can't believe how much you've learned in such a short time. You should consider culinary school." Lauren wrinkled her nose. "I don't know about that. It's not my dream to cook for others. I don't mind doing it for us, but as a forever job, I think I'd slowly lose my mind." "That makes sense," Alyssa said. "I know that I love doing my own books, which is weird, but if I were an accountant, I'd lose my mind." After breakfast, Lauren did the dishes and cleaned a room as Nick was finishing the painting of it. They had a week and a half until the official opening of the Band B, and she and Taylor were the ones who would be running it. Alyssa and Amanda would be doing the work they were so good at, and Kayla would still be flipping houses. After the dishes were done, Lauren pulled on a jacket and went for a walk on the beach. It was the end of May, and there should no longer be a need for jackets, but they were still having snow off and on. It was a little ridiculous, but she couldn't let herself be bothered by it. Her mind was on the topic it had been on for the past 6 months. She still didn't know what she wanted to do when she grew up. She knew she wanted a career, but what kind of career? Her degree had prepared her for nothing realistic, and she wasn't going to spend the rest of her life cooking and cleaning, despite what Taylor wanted. She stood for a moment, looking out across the lake, her heart hurting for the parents she had loved so much. More than anything, she felt as if she'd disappointed them. The only daughter of 5 who didn't have a dream. Where had they gone wrong with her? As she walked back toward the house, she wished she had an answer. There had to be something for her to do that she would love beyond reason. Instead of trying to figure it out, she got in her car and headed for Hobby Lobby in Logan. There had to be some kind of craft that she enjoyed that she could do forever. Something. She made the long windy drive through Logan Canyon, planning to stop to get some lunch while she was in the city. Lauren had always enjoyed eating out alone. She would look around at the people in the restaurant and make up stories about them. She knew it was odd, but she really enjoyed it. She went to lunch first, stopping at Thai House for lunch. She chose the house curry and found it to be amazing. She would make a note and come back. While she ate, she watched people. There was a couple at the table to the right of her. They were obviously uncomfortable with each other, making Lauren believe it was their first date. When she noted that the girl spilled food all down the front of her, she couldn't help but feel bad for her. Another couple was there with a young baby. The mother was constantly trying to soothe her, but she kept giving the man with her strange looks, making Lauren wonder if the man was the baby's father. It was impossible to tell. After lunch, she went to Hobby Lobby and walked up and down the craft aisles. She had no idea what she wanted to do, but there had to be something. Finally, she wandered over to the fabric section and saw a small free handout for making aprons. She purchased some fabric and thread, planning to use her mother's sewing machine, which had ended up in her bedroom. The others had all wanted to get rid of it, but Lauren was determined to at least try to sew. She knew her mother would be happy if she managed it, and she was still trying to please her. Not that it had ever been difficult. She walked to the front of the store with her purchases, wondering if she was getting in over her head and deciding she didn't care. She'd make herself an apron and a couple of extras, and she would know if she liked sewing. Seemed like an easy way to figure it out. When she was home, she carried her purchases to her room before heading to the kitchen to start supper. She knew the others would happily eat pizza if she didn't want to cook, but she was determined to get them all eating at home more. Taylor came down and leaned on the counter, watching her cook. "You seem so efficient in the kitchen now. How did that happen?" Lauren shrugged. "No idea. I never saw myself as the domestic type." When supper was ready, they once again gathered around the dining room table, which was the heart of Romriel House. So many meals had been eaten with extended family at that table. Every time they sat there without their parents, Lauren felt a pang. Every day she waited for them to come out of their bedrooms. She expected to see her mother in the kitchen cooking. Missing them was becoming a way of life. "So, we're opening in a week and a half," Taylor said. "How are the rooms coming along, Nick?" Every day Taylor asked how things were going to get ready for the opening. And every day they all thought she was crazy. It wasn't like everything would or could change overnight. "Good. I think I can have them done next week." Nick didn't seem at all annoyed that he was being asked the same questions. Again. "Don't forget about the gazebo," Alyssa said. "You promised." Lauren knew it was Alyssa's dream to marry in a gazebo, and Nick said he would build it for her. "I'll never forget a promise to you. A gazebo will be in place before the wedding." Alyssa smiled at him, and Lauren's heart longed for someone she could feel that way about. "You're the best fiancé ever." Rather than pretend to gag, Lauren simply smiled. It was hard to watch her sister fall in love and realize she had no prospects for dating. No prospects for a job. No prospects for life. Taylor switched the subject. "I'm going to head into town this week and get some of the things we're going to need. I want you to make me a grocery list for the first week, and whatever you think you'll need, double it. Just in case." She was looking at Lauren when she asked for the grocery list. "Of course. What about this morning's casserole? Keeper?" Lauren asked. She was surprised at how much she wanted praise for her cooking. There were nods all around the table. "I'm going to make some raspberry scones tomorrow with famous Bear Lake raspberries. Maybe we'll put those on the menu as well." Lauren was very excited to talk about the food she would cook. It was strange to her just how much she enjoyed it when she'd spent the first 2 decades of her life avoiding being in the kitchen. "You make it, and we'll eat it," Amanda said, reaching for a second helping of supper. "Seriously, I could eat your cooking all day, every day." Lauren was pleased her sisters loved her cooking, but she secretly wished one of them would step up and learn to cook as well. It wasn't like it was complicated. With her being the only cook, she was going to be working 7 days a week, and it would be nice to have breaks on occasion. "Glad you like it." After dessert, which was a raspberry shortcake, trying to follow along the Bear Lake raspberry theme, she headed to the kitchen to do the dishes and plan supper for the next evening. Something with ground beef. Maybe an enchilada casserole. She wasn't great with Mexican food, but she wanted to get there, because tacos made the world go round. When she'd finished all her chores for the evening, she headed upstairs to cut out the apron she was making. Well, she was making 3, but she'd cut out the first. She'd learned long before that she could be good at anything with a little practice. Maybe that's why it was so hard for her to pick a direction in life. She was so good at everything. Lauren laughed softly. She could tell herself that all day, but it wouldn't change a thing. She was drifting at sea, lost as to what she wanted to do next. Perhaps someday that would change, but today was not that day. Chapter 3. Lauren woke up excited on the day they opened the band B for guests. She would be cooking for a full house, and she couldn't help but feel like she was finally doing something productive with her life. Maybe it wasn't what she wanted to do forever, but it was something. To celebrate, she decided to make a big special dinner for all of her sisters. She cleaned the kitchen and looked at her menu for the 50th time, making sure every ingredient was there for breakfast the following morning. It was hard to believe that everything was really starting. She baked some brownies, adding cream cheese frosting, thinking that she could welcome the guests with them. Each of the rooms had a mini fridge stocked with bottled water and different types of pop. When the guests started trickling in, one of them asked what she was fixing for supper. She hadn't planned to include guests for supper. She told them what she was making, and then quickly texted Taylor. "Am I feeding the guests supper? We're charging for it, so go get more of whatever you need. I have 4 wanting to eat with us tonight. Plan to cook supper every night. I think this is a great way to make a little more money." All right. Lauren wasn't so sure about making supper for so many people, but she was willing if that's what Taylor wanted. More money was always good. She knew she needed to head to the store for more roast though. But 2 meals a day would almost double her workload. Was the money worth it? Just as she was getting her purse to head out, a lone man walked into the kitchen. "Whatever you're making for supper, I'll have to go." He was tall and slender, with dark hair and brown eyes. Lauren felt a pang in her chest just looking at him. Lauren nodded. "Yes, of course. We're having pot roast. You're welcome to eat it in your room, or you can eat at the table with the rest of us." The man shook his head. "No people for me. I prefer the pleasure of my own company." With that, he headed back toward his room, and Lauren shook her head. The man was clearly insane. She hoped he wouldn't be there long. Lauren made the drive into Montpelier to get the extra groceries. Normally, she would have preferred to drive into Pocatello or Logan for the lower prices, but she couldn't make it all the way there and back and still have supper ready on time. She sighed as she drove. If she was cooking for a house full of people, the meal would have to be a bit fancier than planned. She'd make some fresh bread to go with it, and maybe the raspberry shortcake she'd finally perfected. Thankfully, the store was well stocked even if the prices were high. She grabbed what she needed, using the Band B business card to buy it all. It felt strange to her, using the business card, but she knew it was what she was supposed to do. Taylor would have her hide if she didn't. When she got back home, she started the pot roast in the oven. Thankfully, the weather had stayed cold all through May, and now that it was June 1st, the weathermen were saying another snowstorm was even possible. Very strange. She mixed up dough for dinner rolls, all at once excited. Now that she had everything she needed, she wanted to make this meal for the guests. Even for the cranky man who preferred the pleasure of his own company. Where had he come from anyway? As soon as she'd finished mixing the dough, Lauren went to the front desk in the foyer. "That single guy, how long is he staying?" She had her fingers crossed behind her back, hoping he'd be gone in the morning. Taylor glanced down at her computer. "He's booked through the end of September." "Wait, are you kidding me? 4 months? I don't know if I can handle not killing the man for that long." "You can't already dislike him. You don't even know him." Lauren shrugged. "He's already getting on my nerves. Sounds like he's going to expect every meal in his room. Can guys be divas? Because I think we have one in our midst." She wished she could say what she wanted to say to the man, She knew that Taylor wouldn't approve though, and technically Taylor was now her boss, though she was one of Taylor's bosses too. It was certainly a strange, twisted business at the moment. Just be nice to him, Lauren. Even if he gets on your nerves. It's important. Fine. I'll try. Can I slip messages that aren't nice under his door at night? Lauren Renee Romriel. You cannot be mean to him. He's a guest in our home. What would Mom say? Taylor gave her a big sister look, and Lauren wrinkled her nose. She wouldn't approve. I guess I'll be a good girl and be nice to the freak. How can you call a man you've barely met a freak? Better than calling him a serial killer, right? Lauren walked away from the desk, annoyed Taylor hadn't been willing to listen to her. There was something wrong with the man, and she didn't want to have to be around him for 4 months straight. Ugh. Back in the kitchen, she peeked under the towel covering the bread dough. She'd decided to make dinner rolls out of it, and she couldn't wait to see the looks on people's faces when they tried them. Oh, and she'd make some honey butter. Local Bear Lake honey, mixed with some butter made in Cache Valley. They'd keep everything local as best they could. She sat at the kitchen table and read for a while as the food cooked. She got up when she needed to, punching down the bread and turning it into rolls, then letting it rise once more. She'd never taken the time to make dinner rolls before, and she was excited. It hurt her hands to knead as much as she had to for the bread, and next time she'd use the KitchenAid mixer, but just this once, she wanted to do it the way it would have been done 150 years ago. Before mixers were even invented. Once was enough of that nonsense, though. Modern conveniences were there for a reason. Who was she to thumb her nose at over 100 years of ingenuity? Different people popped their heads into the kitchen as she sat there reading, many of them ordering picnic lunches for the next day. They had set things up so she would make quick lunches that people could take with them to the beach or for hiking. She figured that most of the week people would be eating from the taco boat for lunch, but Brandon was closed for business on Sundays. Lauren smiled as she thought of the delicious tacos he made. She couldn't help but hope Taylor would marry the man so they could keep his culinary genius in the family. As soon as supper was ready, Lauren took one of the takeout containers Taylor had purchased. Neither had been sure they'd need them, but it was a good thing they had them. Lauren filled the container with the pot roast, mashed potatoes, carrots, celery, and onions. Then she wrapped one of the homemade rolls in a napkin and shoved it all into a small bag. Adding a small disposable bowl of the gravy and another of the raspberry shortcake, and she felt as if the meal was complete. Maybe he was weird and a bit of a tool, but she was going to treat him well anyway. The man she'd met earlier came to the kitchen just as she was getting everything on the table for the guests eating with them. Nodding to the bag, she said, "Your supper's in there." I added a plastic fork, knife, and spoon. Dessert is there as well if you want it. The man nodded. It smells wonderful. Thanks. I made it myself. Lauren looked at him for a moment. What are you going to do in your room for 4 months? Do you have a job here? He shook his head. Nope. No job. With that, he turned and left, heading back to his room. Well, Mr. Mystery, you seem a little more like a serial killer every time I see you, she said softly as he walked away. Taylor walked into the kitchen then. You need to keep that opinion to yourself, sister dear. Mr. Thibodeau does not need you to tell him you think he's a serial killer. Maybe and maybe not. Taylor sighed dramatically. You're going to be a challenge to work with, aren't you, Lauren? It's my job. What else would I do with my time? Lauren refused to back down. Not where that man was involved. No idea. Taylor grabbed the platter of meat and basket of rolls, carrying them off into the dining room. Lauren enjoyed supper, getting to know some of the guests. They all gushed over her cooking. Where did you go to culinary school? A woman who was traveling with a friend asked. Lauren laughed softly. From the school of my mother's kitchen. We spent lots of time working on my cooking skills right up until her death a few months ago. The woman looked sad. I'm so sorry for your loss. I lost my mother to breast cancer a couple of years ago. Life isn't the same without her. Alyssa looked over at Lauren, covering her hand with her own. We all miss her every day. We'll always be thankful for all the wonderful things she taught us, Amanda said. Taylor jumped in to change the subject. I hope you all found your room satisfactory. Since you're our first group, we'd love feedback of what you like and what you don't. Lauren barely listened to the responses. That was Taylor's thing. She'd do as she was told and keep the kitchen going. After the kitchen was cleaned, Lauren went upstairs alone to read for a while. She could have grabbed any of her sisters to spend the time with her, but what she really wanted was a little time alone. Her days would be long at the Bandby. So much longer than she'd imagined. She had signed on to make breakfast and help clean rooms, not make supper as well. She couldn't let her sisters down, though. They all had too much invested to back away now. Asterisk. Justin took the meal into his room and sat down at the desk there to eat it. He had badly needed to get away to work on his book. He'd felt stifled in Louisiana, all of his family feeling like he should be running their errands and sitting and waiting for their repairmen. They didn't understand that being an author meant he actually had to write books. Without writing, there would be no money. He sighed. He would make it work. Leaving for a small town in Idaho had seemed the perfect solution. He'd be able to work in his room, and he could wander out and get meals when he was hungry. It made perfect sense. Now if he could just get his mind off the pretty brunette in the kitchen, he'd be all set. He ate his meal quickly, as he did most meals. Food was fuel for his body and nothing more. He needed fuel for his mind. And he wasn't a romance writer, so the girl from the kitchen had to be forgotten. No one wanted to read a smarmy murder mystery with a couple of people falling in love. Why would they? He stuffed the containers his food had come in back into the bag he'd been given and wadded it up, tossing it toward the trash. He'd pick it up later. For now, he needed to write another 5,000 words before bedtime. He was behind schedule because he'd been traveling all day, but he felt like he'd finally found the right place for him to work. There was even a sauna and a hot tub he could jump into when he was ready. He put his fingers on the keyboard and closed his eyes, letting the words flow from his mind through his fingertips. He grinned as he typed out a particularly gruesome crime scene. He didn't think it was possible to love a job as much as he loved writing. He'd found his calling. Chapter 4. They'd been open for a week when it was time for Lauren to clean Mr. Thibodeau's room. Though she thought of him as Mr. Mystery, she was afraid he'd take that as a compliment. He left his room to get his meals and went straight back in to eat them. The man was a recluse, plain and simple. He was either an FBI agent or a serial killer, and she was leaning strongly toward the serial killer scenario. She knocked on his door, and it took him 2 minutes to open it. I need to clean your room. Maybe you could go walk on the beach for an hour or so? He glared at her. Fine. He walked to a desk, snapped a laptop closed, and tucked it under his arm. Are there any coffee shops in town with internet? Lauren laughed. In this little town? No. You could go to the library, but it's in Montpelier. You'd get there, open your laptop, and it would be time to come back. You could go outside and do whatever you want to do. Or use your cell phone as a hotspot. He sighed dramatically. I'll go sit in my car, I guess. Maybe you'll spot your next victim. Victim? Lauren swallowed hard, realizing she'd already said too much. What does it matter? You're a serial killer, right? Either that or an FBI agent. Who else would sit in their room all day? The man laughed loudly. I'm afraid I can't answer that. And he walked off, his laptop tucked under his arm as he went. She shook her head, disgusted with him. Then she looked at his room. She choked. How could anyone let a room get so filthy in just a week? It was ridiculous, and she wasn't tackling it alone. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she called Taylor. I'm not cleaning this mess by myself. Bring some contractor garbage bags. She ended the call before Taylor could respond. She carefully pulled gloves out of her back pocket. She put them there so that Taylor would think she used them to clean the rooms, but she never did. Suddenly she felt the need. By the time Taylor arrived with a box of contractor bags, Lauren had cleaned the bathroom, but she'd left the room the way she'd found it. Taylor walked in and stood for a moment with her mouth open in shock. What did he do in here? Bathroom's clean, Lauren announced, sounding as chipper as she could force her voice to be. Now we just have to do this room. Taylor took a deep breath. I'll pick up all the takeout containers. Do you realize there is nothing in his trash can? Everything is piled up around it. I'll strip the bed. Lauren refused to even respond. She'd warned Taylor about the crazy man the day he'd moved in, and she wasn't going to act like she was surprised at this mess. She put her words into action and stripped the bed, making a pile of the linens on the floor. She decided that she'd wash everything that had been on it with as filthy as it was. They'd have to do that in here every week. It took Taylor 10 minutes to just pick up the trash from the floor. By the time she was finished, Lauren had the bed made. So, do you think he's a serial killer or an FBI agent? Taylor shook her head, refusing to respond. I asked him and he just walked away laughing. Lauren sighed. I'm going to figure him out if it kills me. And if he's a serial killer and thinks I'm onto him, it just might. Lauren could just picture the man dumping bodies into the lake. Or onto land that was not well traveled. They'd have to keep the contractor bags hidden from him. Taylor groaned. Lauren, you cannot accuse our guests of being serial killers. It's in the Band B owner's handbook. It's Hospitality 101. I haven't seen this handbook. May I borrow yours? Lauren suspected the book Taylor always quoted didn't exist. As soon as I finish writing it, it will be yours to peruse. Aha! Lauren said with feeling. And what does that mean? Taylor sounded disgusted as she went to work dusting while Lauren wheeled in the vacuum cleaner. It means you're making up rules and expecting me to follow them. It's not fair. Although Lauren knew her sister understood a great deal more about the hospitality industry than she did, she wasn't about to back down. It's common courtesy, Lauren. If you had asked a guest of Mom's if he was an FBI agent or a serial killer, what would she have done? Hidden a grin and then pretended to be stern, of course. Their mother had always had trouble disciplining them. She thought they were funny. Especially Lauren. Taylor couldn't help but smile at that. She never could help but smile when we were being cutely naughty, could she? Or is that naughtily cute? Lauren laughed as she turned on the vacuum. They only had an hour, and the mess was worthy of a 3-hour clean. Mr. Mystery came back just as they were finishing up. Lauren glared at him. You should probably start eating with the rest of the guests in the dining room. No one should have to clean up a mess like this one. Ever. He shrugged. I tried to get the containers into the trash can. He didn't look a bit remorseful, and Lauren would have loved to kick him. Of course, with Taylor watching, she could do nothing of the sort. Not exactly a basketball player, are you? Taylor gave Lauren a quelling look, and Lauren sighed. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please consider joining us for supper. You slob. She wished Taylor hadn't been there to keep her from saying what she wanted to say. She loved all her sisters, but sometimes they were a real pain in her butt. Back in the kitchen, Lauren wanted to wash her hands with bleach, but she settled for a good scrubbing at the sink. Chicken and dumplings for supper, she told Taylor, who'd followed her in. And cornbread. I think I'm going to make a cornbread casserole with cheese and jalapenos. And a salad. Sounds good to me. Do you need any help? Taylor always offered to help with supper, but she knew Lauren would never accept. No, I'll do it. It's my job after all. You're going to be paid 50% more than we originally decided on. All of us had a meeting about it. Lauren smiled. That will be nice. Money wasn't her main goal in life, but getting the raise made her feel like she was worth more, and that mattered to her. Especially since she hadn't asked for it. As Lauren prepped supper so she could just throw it into the huge roasting pan and make her life easier later, she thought about how drastically her life had changed in the last 6 months. She'd graduated less than 6 months before, and in that time, she'd lost both of her parents, moved to a new state, and started her first grown-up job. She was happy to be with her sisters, and honestly a little sad that Alyssa was getting married in a week. Sad for herself, but not for Alyssa. Nick was the perfect man for her. They clicked in a way Alyssa had never clicked with Tim, her previous boyfriend. Lauren knew it would be hard to go to the wedding and smile as one of the bridesmaids when she wanted to grab onto her oldest sister and never let her go. Just one more week, and they'd be having the wedding in the gazebo built by Nick and Kayla. And Lauren missed Kayla. They hadn't gotten together as much as either of them would have liked in Utah, but it had been nice to know that her sister was close by. Now she was in another state. She'd be coming later in the week though, and she was hoping she'd be coming to stay, but no one had heard whether that was happening or not. At least she'd have Kayla to hang out with at the wedding. Mr. Mystery wandered back out to the kitchen while she was finishing up the immediate work she needed to do for supper. Do you need something? She asked. I was hoping for a snack of some sort. I forgot to have you make me a lunch today. Lauren rolled her eyes. I can make you a lunch. Or there are some leftovers from last night's chicken cacciatore if that sounds good. Oh. Leftovers, please. It's so hard to believe someone as difficult to be around as you are can cook like an angel, but that's what you do. Difficult to be around? Me? I'm one of the sweetest people on this planet. Why do you think I'm difficult to be around? Lauren smiled her sweetest smile, thinking about strangling him with a contractor bag. She couldn't help but wondered just how blue his face would get. He groaned. Don't start with me, Lauren. Lauren got the chicken out of the fridge and put some into a bowl, nuking it for 3 minutes. When she was done, she dumped it into a takeout container and handed it to him. Happy now? Silverware, please? She took a wrapped set of plastic silverware with a napkin out of a drawer and handed it to him. Anything else? No, this is perfect for now. And you're going to take it into your room and eat it while you're researching your next victim? She asked. Something like that. He took the food and walked away, leaving her glaring at his back. The man was impossible, and he needed to go away. She wondered if she could talk Taylor into kicking him out. Well, not before she figured out what he was doing in there, but soon. First, she needed to check and see if there were any missing people in the area, or worse, if there were any murders. She'd have heard about it, but she had to check anyway. Lauren was no slouch where research was concerned, and she'd do her best. Justin walked into his room and sat down at his desk with the takeout container. He really needed to eat dinner with the whole household that night, just to keep Lauren guessing. He wasn't ashamed of being a mystery writer, but he could tell she loved trying to figure out what he was doing. Who was he to take her fun away? He read over the chapter he'd just finished writing, smiling and nodding to himself. The words flowed, just like they were supposed to. This book was going to hit the bestsellers list, just like the last four had. He wanted #1 on the NYT list this time, but he wasn't sure he'd make it. The last one had hit #3, but this one was a great deal more anticipated than the last. With each book he gained more momentum, and he felt like he was doing better every time. If only his family wasn't constantly bugging him. He'd had to put his phone on silent to keep his mother from calling him all day, every day. He took 1 hour every evening to return phone calls. That was it. No more distractions. After he finished eating, he put his fingers on the keyboard and once again let the words flow through him. Sometimes it felt as if he was just a conduit for someone else's brain, making up creepy stories that just came to him. Other times it felt like he was pulling teeth, having to research every little detail of a certain kind of murder. All at once, he grinned. Lauren was going to clean his room next Friday. Perhaps he would leave his laptop open to one of his research windows about a certain type of death and how it was investigated. Oh, wouldn't she get a kick out of that? Well, if she didn't, then he would. He couldn't wait. Her mind would be blown. And making Lauren's life difficult had become one of his favorite pastimes. He was going to join the group for supper that night. He was going to be nonchalant about it as if he ate with them every single night. Oh, he was definitely going to blow her mind. He rubbed his hands together before putting his fingers on the keyboard once again. The serial killer in his book was going to toy with the woman he was about to kill. And he knew just how the man was going to do it. Chapter 5. That week was filled with activity preparing for Alyssa's wedding on Saturday. Lauren was arguing with Mr. Mystery in the kitchen when Kayla arrived with 2 suitcases. She was there to stay. Lauren couldn't express how happy she was that Kayla was finally with them for good. It seemed like they'd been waiting for her arrival forever. Lauren spent the whole week trying out recipes for finger foods, knowing that it was what Alyssa wanted served for the reception. She was having to share her kitchen with Brandon, the taco boat guy that Taylor was rapidly falling in love with, and she didn't really want to share it. There was no choice though, since she wanted to eat the tacos Brandon made at the reception. In her opinion, his tacos were the best in the entire region. She was determined to get him to share his taco-making secrets with her. She tested many different recipes on the guests, and they'd blocked out the dates of the wedding weekend for guests, all but Mr. Mystery, who had booked so much time, they couldn't really kick him out for 3 nights. On Friday morning, she entered his room already gloved, hoping that it wouldn't be as bad as the previous week, but it was. It was so bad she couldn't stand it. Thankfully, Taylor was at her side to help her clean. She had just finished the bathroom when she spotted his laptop sitting open on his desk. She walked over to just peek at what was on his screen, and her eyes widened when she saw the last search he'd made. Best places to hide a human body in Idaho. Taylor. You need to look at this. What? Taylor asked, looking up from the trash she was picking up so she could vacuum. This man is a slob. I know, but look. Lauren pointed at his laptop screen. Do you see that? I see that you're being nosy, Lauren Renee. You need to leave the poor man alone and find a new hobby. Spying on the guests is not only rude, it's unprofessional. Stop it. Taylor gave her a stern, big sister look, obviously expecting her to comply immediately. There's a search about the best places to hide a body in Idaho. Look. I'm not looking. You can make up anything you want, Lauren. The man is not a serial killer. Taylor shook her head. Now get back to work before he comes in here and sees you snooping. Lauren got back to work, but she wasn't happy about it. She couldn't help but wonder if he'd searched that just to freak her out, or if he'd done it for his next kill. There was a psycho living in their family vacation home, and no one would even listen to her about it. She sighed as she stripped the bed. Someday they'd all listen. If they weren't all dead. When Mr. Mystery got back to his room, he immediately rushed in and shut his laptop, looking at Lauren as if he was worried she'd seen it. Jerk. Whether or not he was a serial killer, he was still a jerk. Lauren wasn't surprised when he went with the other men on Friday night for a bachelor party. She could see Amanda trying not to look at Ryan, Nick's best man, but it was obvious she was developing feelings for him. As the men left together, Lauren called out to Mr. Mystery to remember that she was saving him a dance. His face went white when she said it, and he hurried out of the house. She hoped it was because he was a little afraid of her. Who didn't want annoying men to be afraid of them? After he was gone, she cornered Taylor. Mr. Mystery's going to be gone for hours, and he left his laptop. I'm going to search it. No, you're not. But Taylor, don't you think we all have a right to know if there's a serial killer in our midst? Maybe he's secretly thinking about burning the house down. Lauren frowned. And you know he's trying to find places to hide human bodies in Idaho. Who does that? No, Lauren. No. Taylor walked away and joined the others then, but Lauren knew she'd be keeping an eye on her all night. She should have just done it without saying anything first. Next time she'd know better. The following morning, Lauren was up before dawn, helping Hannah decorate the wedding cake. Hannah had worked 3 jobs since high school to try to raise enough money to open a lavish bookstore, and ground would be broken on it in just a few days. One of the jobs she'd worked was in a bakery that had since closed down. She'd learned to decorate wedding cakes, and it was her gift to Alyssa to make her cake herself. Brandon was there shortly after, making his tacos. He was doing tiny little tacos as his contribution to the wedding feast. If you need help finding anything, let me know, Lauren told him as she licked a bit of frosting from her finger. Thanks, I will. Taylor came downstairs to make sure everything was going well, before she rushed back up to help Alyssa get ready. Lauren wished she could be there for more of the preparation, but she was needed in the kitchen, and she wasn't about to let Alyssa and Nick down. Many hours later, after a wedding ceremony that had all 5 sisters plus Hannah in tears, Lauren looked around for Mr. Mystery. She'd promised him a dance, and she wasn't one to renege on a promise. He wasn't anywhere she could see, which was odd. He'd been eating and talking to Ryan a short while before. She went in the house to find him, and saw Amanda in there talking to the object of her search. Come on. I promised you a dance, and that means we're going to dance. You don't have to dance with me. I'm fine. Lauren grabbed his hand and dragged him back outside to the makeshift dance floor. A local band was playing a slow song, and she went into his arms, dancing closely with him. See? This isn't so bad. I'm fine on my own. I don't need you to dance with me. What if I need you to dance with me? What if I was sitting all alone, pining for your smiles? He laughed. Yeah, right. I'm really not into dancing, Lauren. You should find some other sucker to dance with you. Sucker? I'm doing you a favor by dancing with you, and you tell me to find another sucker? What is wrong with you? She shook her head, sighing dramatically. I'm a good person to have on your side. Is that right? I could be a character witness when the police finally catch you. I'll say that I've never seen you kill someone. That would be especially helpful, wouldn't it? As they danced and joked around together, Lauren finally understood why the man made her crazy. She had a teeny tiny crush on him. Nothing major, and she'd get over it, but there were some feelings there. After the reception, we could go for a walk on the beach. No, I need to get back to my room. Lauren narrowed her eyes at him. The man wasn't classically handsome. He had dark hair and eyes and was much too skinny to be called good-looking. What did you start to say? I know it wasn't your room. What do you need to get back to? She opened her mouth to tell him she'd seen his search for places to hide bodies, but she changed her mind. She really didn't want to be his next victim. Even if the man who killed her was someone she had a small crush on, she'd still be deader than a doornail. I'm just tired, so I'm going back to my room, and I'll sleep early tonight. He didn't meet her eyes as he said it, and she knew it wasn't true. Lauren lowered her voice to a whisper. You can tell me. I can keep a secret. How many people have you killed since coming here? Do you target women? Or do you target by hair color? She pursed her lips. Or do you target by the color of the shirt they're wearing when you first see them? Oh, the color of their eyes. Of course. He shook his head. I'm not a serial killer. Oh, please. We both know that's not true. Besides, a serial killer would always deny being a serial killer. If he admitted it, he'd be in jail. You're smart to not admit it. Lauren grinned at him. She felt less and less like he was a serial killer, but more and more like she needed to find out what he did in his room all day. And all night. She wondered if she could set up some motion sensors above his door. Or a spy camera in his room. That could work. He had to smile at that. You know, Lauren. You're a mess and a half, and I don't know why I like you, but I think I do. She grinned. Are you sure you don't want to go for that walk on the beach? She really hoped he would someday play the aggressor with her, because she seemed to be making all the moves. Was she going to have to grab him and kiss him just to get his attention? He nodded. I'm sure. I really do need to get back to my room. Why? Because I didn't plan to spend an entire day at your sister's wedding. Like that's a good reason. Lauren didn't want to let him go. She liked swaying back and forth in his arms. And that's when she realized the music had changed, and the people around them were doing much faster dances, while the two of them still swayed back and forth. She couldn't help but feel a rush of emotion. He hadn't noticed the song had sped up either. Chapter 6. Justin stared down at the little Spitfire in his arms. She looked so much like her sisters, and yet she was completely different. They were all normal, but they didn't make his body react like this girl did. His heart sped up as he looked at her, and he felt a tightening in the front of his slacks. What was he doing having feelings for Lauren Romriel? His body felt things for her, but his brain knew better. She was a brat. What's wrong with my body? He would have to forever be telling himself that she was more than a little crazy. He sighed. She was so pretty, and his body kept forgetting that she thought he was a serial killer. Holding her close was something a teenage boy's dreams were made of, but he was too old to fall for her charms. He'd left his teens almost a decade ago. I really do need to go, he said. He had another 6,000 words to write that day, and he wanted to hit his goals. Well, he always wanted to hit his goals, but he'd left Louisiana and his family for a reason. Sometimes just walking through the French Quarter had made him feel connected to the history of the city and had made him want to write more. Now that he was away from it all, he needed to buckle down and work. This book needed to get finished and soon. And here, he had no distractions and a lake view on one side of him and mountains on the other. There was nothing holding him back now. Too bad he couldn't say no one was holding him back. There was something about the fresh air and the water that was making working much easier for him. Maybe it was the lack of crowds. Whatever it was, he needed to take advantage of it while he was in Idaho. Lauren frowned up at him. So, you can research your next kill? She asked. Justin looked down into her eyes, wanting nothing more than to kiss her. He had to get away and soon, or he was going to do something incredibly stupid. Something like that. He pulled away from her, only to be bumped into from behind. That's when he realized the music was much faster than it had been. He closed his eyes in embarrassment. What was it about this woman that made his heart speed up and his body tighten? I'll pop out for supper later. I'm not cooking tonight. You'll have to get something from somewhere else. He frowned, but he couldn't argue with her. He was leaving her in the middle of the dance floor, after all. And they'd told him he'd be on his own for dinner that night. He just hadn't wanted to believe it. I'll get pizza or something. Usually she let him raid the fridge if he didn't want to go anywhere, but obviously that wasn't an option that day. Darn it all. Just so you know, I'm not going to be the one feeding you. Her eyes looked hurt, but he wasn't at all certain why. She thought he was a serial killer. Why did she want to dance with him anyway? For a moment, just one brief moment, he thought about telling her what he did for a living, so she'd know he wasn't the villain she accused him of being. But then he realized that the most fun he had in Richland was teasing Lauren Romriel. What would he do for enjoyment if she knew he was a mystery writer? He shrugged. I know. He turned to walk away, wishing he could take her in his arms and kiss her madly. Maybe that would get her out of his system. Constant thoughts of Lauren kept him from working, and that wasn't good at all. Justin swiftly walked into the house and back to his room, locking the door behind him. She had a key to his room, of course, but he could put the chain lock on as well. He leaned back against it, shaking his head. Lauren needed to start leaving him alone. Perhaps if he made an effort to be more polite around her, not rising to her constant baiting of him. But again, what would be the fun in that? In the back of his overactive imagination, he could still see taking her into his arms and kissing her madly. It's what he'd wanted to do since the moment he'd met her. He walked to his computer and put his fingers on the keyboard. The serial killer in his book needed to ignore his usual pattern and kill off a beautiful brunette. She had to be a wonderful cook and have lips begging to be kissed. Once she was dead in the book, it would be easier to ignore her in real life. At least that's how the theory worked. Asterisk. Lauren glared at Justin as he walked away from her. The man needed to be shot. Drawn and quartered. Murdered in his sleep. She was annoyed with him, again. They'd had such a lovely dance, and then he'd turned it into a bad time for her. Why? Why couldn't he just be pleasant all the time like a normal human being? Ugh. She stayed outside with the wedding guests for a long while, but in her mind, she was thinking of ways to kill the man off. In fact, she made a mental list of her top 10 favorite ways. She'd type it out later, and it would make her smile. In her mind, though, it was a lovely list. The first way was boring, because it was just drowning him in the lake, but after that, she felt a little more creative about it. She could easily poison him, because she cooked all of his meals. But it would need to be his favorite meal, because it wouldn't be fun to watch him die if he was just eating something he mildly cared for. That would involve a research project to find out what he liked. Could be fun, but annoying as well. Talking to him was always annoying. The third way was to wait until late at night, when the main road was deserted, and she would find a way to fasten him to the road. She'd have to think a little more on how to do it, but it would be awesome to just let him be run over. She could slit his throat, but she didn't like the idea of having to clean up all the blood that would ensue. She could kill him outside, but she'd still have to either throw away her clothes or clean the blood out of them. No, a less bloody way of killing him would be best. Kayla walked over to her and linked arms with her. Penny for your thoughts. Lauren grinned. Thinking about the best ways to kill off Mr. Mystery. She wouldn't have told the truth to anyone else, but Kayla would understand. She always did. Kayla laughed softly, shaking her head. I think it's good that I intervened then. You don't need to be killing anyone. Or even contemplating killing someone. You know how bad you look in orange. That's why it needs to be the perfect murder. I can't risk getting caught. I'm too pretty for jail. Kayla rested her head on Lauren's shoulder for a moment. I love you so much, Lauren. I hope you know that. Because I'm such a kind, caring person turned potential killer? Lauren grinned at her sister, knowing she'd be amused by her response. That's got to be it. We should do a girls' night tonight, Lauren said. I know we had one last night, but that was more of a bachelorette party. With all of us sisters here and no work to really do, I think it would be nice for us to spend the night conquering the world. Besides, you had chocolate marshmallow ice cream without me this week. What was that all about anyway? Chocolate marshmallow was her absolute favorite, and they'd eaten it all, without offering her a single bite. Kayla sighed. I've been sworn to secrecy by Amanda. You'll have to ask her. Don't think I won't. Sisters share their secrets. It's just how things are done. Of course, it is. Kayla looked around her. It looks like most people are gone. Do you want to help me clean up? Not particularly, but I know I'm supposed to, so I will. Lauren yawned. My liberal arts degree has to be good for something, and I think picking up trash is right up my alley. She knew she made it sound like a joke, but her lack of direction in life was always at the back of her mind. She needed to figure things out soon, or she'd go insane. Kayla started for the house, and Lauren followed. I still say your liberal arts degree trumps my high school diploma any day of the week. I'm not so sure. You have a skill and I have a liberal arts degree. Don't knock it. I love your degree. Kayla shrugged. I'm ready to get back to work. I hope Alyssa finds me a house soon. Well, she has to honeymoon first. I'm so happy for her. Lauren grinned. I'll miss her too. All 5 of us really only got to live together under one roof for less than a week. I was imagining endless slumber parties and pillow fights. Lauren pulled 6 contractor bags from a roll under the counter in the kitchen. These should get us started. If they don't, nothing will. Are the kids who are serving the food paid to help clean up? Kayla asked. Taylor said they were supposed to help. But if the 4 of us get in there and help as well, it'll take a fraction of the time. Alyssa, Nick, and 80% of the guests had already left. The few remaining were showing signs of leaving soon. I totally agree. Kayla grabbed one of the bags, and the 2 of them headed back outside, ready to tackle the trash that had conquered their lawn, all while still wearing their bridesmaid dresses. Within the hour, the reception remains had been conquered and disposed of, the kids serving the food had been paid, and the sisters had gathered in the living room for their girls' night. All but Alyssa, of course. Before the night was over, Lauren understood what Kayla had meant about Amanda's secret to tell, and her heart was broken for her sister, who had lost the man she intended to marry. As they all headed to their separate rooms, Lauren hugged Amanda. Can I make you a special dinner? Amanda smiled. It's been over a year. I think I can handle life without a special meal. Okay, but if you change your mind, I'm here for you. Lauren couldn't imagine losing someone she loved. Thank you for caring enough to offer. Always. That's what sisters are for. Secrets and caring. Lauren headed into her room, looking back at Amanda for just a moment. Love you. Amanda smiled. Love you right back. Lauren closed her door and walked to the sewing machine. She'd made the aprons, and she'd enjoyed it so much, she'd started on some more. She'd talked Taylor into selling them to the guests. There was a need to keep 2 for herself though. She always ended the day covered in whatever food she'd made. As she sewed, she let her mind wander. For her, it was a time of not having to concentrate completely, and that was nice. Her brain needed time to think of the things it wanted to think of and not just the things she wanted to force on it. Within moments, her mind was on Justin again. What was it about that man that made her mind cling to him? It made her crazy. He wasn't anything special to look at really. A tall, lanky man with an Adam's apple that bulged when he talked. He wore glasses half the time. No, he wasn't special looks-wise, but she didn't know what he was. Maybe that was the problem. She'd figure the man out and then never think of him again. It had to work. After finishing the apron, the first she planned to sell, Lauren took a long hot bath and finished one of her favorite mystery writer's latest novels. When she finally climbed into bed, her brain was filled with blood, murder, and mayhem, and a few new ways she could kill Mr. Mystery. It had been a very productive day. He was the last thing on her mind as she fell asleep that night. The man made her heart race, and she needed her attraction to him to be over. Chapter 7. The following week was a week of transition for Lauren. She was getting used to Alyssa being gone. Even though her eldest sister had spent most of her time with Nick for weeks, it still felt strange that they weren't sleeping under the same roof. She'd always looked up to Alyssa and respected her a great deal. She already missed her. She and Justin bickered as usual in the kitchen when he came to get his meals, and he actually ate a few of them at the table, which freaked her out more than she could express. Every time he ate with them, she'd look around the table, trying to decide who his next victim was. She hoped it wasn't one of her sisters. Part of the problem for Lauren was she'd felt so much chemistry between them while they danced, and then he'd turned and walked away, leaving her there on the dance floor. And now everything was back the way it was. Everything but her, of course. She wasn't certain she would ever, or could ever, be the same again. On Thursday, an older couple came to stay for several days. The woman, who introduced herself as Dr. Lachille, stopping in the kitchen to find out what was for supper, and Lauren felt as if she was being studied under a microscope. "Is there something wrong? You have a look of intense sadness in your eyes," Dr. Lachille said. Lauren shrugged. "I lost my parents this year. I'm not sure how to get past it." That could definitely be it. Losing both your parents in 1 year has got to be tough. Same day. They were killed in a car accident. Lauren reached into the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. She held it up. "You want one?" Dr. Lachille shook her head. "Not at the moment." She had an intense look on her face that frightened Lauren just a little. "I have a PhD in psychology, and one of my occupations is as a mental health counselor. I could make some time for a chat while I'm here." Lauren sighed. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Though she did need to talk to someone who wasn't involved in what was going on there in Richland. "I'll think about it." "All right. Let me know. Sam and I have fun things planned, but mostly I plan to read and read a little more. On the beach. Maybe on a boat while Sam feeds worms to the fish. But I can certainly work around all that." Lauren grinned. "Your husband isn't a good fisherman?" "Not at all, but don't tell him that. He thinks he's God's gift to fishing. It's a good thing we don't make a living from his fish, because he's better at catching seaweed and trash than he is fish. Hopefully he'll have better luck in our beautiful lake here. Oh, and don't forget to try out the taco boat that comes every day at noon. I promise, you will not be disappointed." Lauren tried to talk up Brandon's taco boat to everyone who came to stay. He made amazing tacos, and he was in love with her sister. She couldn't imagine a better combination. "I'll do that. I'm a huge taco fan." "Me too. And Brandon definitely makes the best tacos in the area, if not in all of Idaho." Though I did hear a story about a taco truck up in Quinn Valley that's supposed to have amazing tacos. I wonder if we could get the two men together for a showdown. Lauren loved the idea of trying the best tacos in the state and comparing them. Dr. Lachelle smiled. I would be all for it. Especially if they let me be the judge. And me? Lauren protested. It was my idea. That's true. We'll judge it together. With that, Dr. Lachelle was off toward her room, leaving Lauren in the kitchen with the ingredients for supper spread out in front of her. As Lauren got back to work, she thought about what the other woman had said to her about counseling. It might be the best idea there was. She could talk openly about Mr. Mystery, and perhaps Dr. Lachelle would have some insight into the man's personality. Asterisk. The following evening after supper, Lauren and Dr. Lachelle met in Lauren's bedroom to talk. Thanks for being willing to do this, Lauren said by way of starting the conversation. I could tell you were bothered by something, and helping people is a great joy for me. Let's start with your parents' death. Lauren bit her lip. Maybe we should start a little before that. I graduated from college in December with a liberal arts degree. I don't know what I was thinking, except that I had to get out of school soon or lose my mind. I was really close to a liberal arts degree, so I just finished and graduated to be done. Now I have no idea what I want to do or be when I grow up. Dr. Lachelle smiled. That's pretty common. Well, it doesn't feel that way to me. All of my sisters know what they want out of life. Everyone I know has a purpose, and I'm just kind of free-floating through life. Lauren shook her head. And then Mom and Dad died, and we opened this place, and now we have a serial killer living here. Mom has to be rolling over in her grave. A serial killer? Who exactly do you think is a serial killer? Dr. Lachelle looked perplexed. Justin Thibodeau. He's been here since the day we opened, and he's staying at least until the end of September. He leaves his room to get meals, and when we make him leave so we can clean the mess he's spent a week making. And his search history on his laptop shows him trying to research where to hide a body in Idaho. Dr. Lachelle grinned, and her tinkling laughter filled the room. Thankfully, she didn't ask how Lauren had come to see his search history. That boy is no more a serial killer than I am. I don't know, have you talked to him yet? I asked him if he was a serial killer, and he denied it, but he won't tell me what he's doing in his room. I'm certain he's up to something nefarious. Dr. Lachelle shook her head. He's in there working on his computer. Now, I don't know what he's doing, but he's working. Lauren sighed. He's searching for his next victim, of course. She looked down at her nails. I danced with him at my sister's wedding, and I felt something. There was a spark, and I know he felt it too, but he ran off before we could explore it. She shrugged. It's probably best if I don't spend time thinking about my attraction for a serial killer. Really? I should talk to him, and then I can let you know if the two of you are compatible. I'm a matchmaker, you see. I introduce people at the altar. Wait, I thought you were a mental health counselor, and that's why I'm talking to you. Lauren narrowed her eyes. That too. You see, I spent years just counseling and matching up friends, but I found that when people met they didn't fight through the tough times of getting to know one another, even if they were perfect for each other. So now, I make people sign a contract stating they'll stay together for a full year before I introduce them. It works for me. And for them. I've never had a marriage fail. Dr. Lachelle leaned forward earnestly. Do you want me to talk to him? Lauren shook her head. No, but maybe I want you to match me up with someone. Can you do that? I can, but I'm not sure that's the right thing for you. Would you at least try? I need to be going somewhere with my life, even if it's just going to a marriage. I need to feel needed. Dr. Lachille studied Lauren for a moment. Let's get back to where we were. We'll talk some more about your life. Lauren nodded, but the idea of having Dr. Lachille match her with someone was still on her mind. Justin wandered out to the kitchen for a late snack, expecting to see Lauren there, but she wasn't. He wasn't really hungry or anything, he just wanted to see her. When she wasn't there, he frowned and stood in the kitchen, wishing she was there. He'd just killed the girl he'd modeled off her in his book, and he needed to lay eyes on her. It felt dirty. Something wrong? Taylor asked from right behind him. He jumped. Just expected to see Lauren toiling away in the kitchen as always. It feels empty without her there. Taylor smiled. You're right. It was hard when we first moved here to adjust to seeing Lauren in the kitchen instead of our mom, but now I need to see her there. She must be busy. Do you need something? He shrugged. I was hoping for leftovers from last night on a sandwich if there are any. Justin felt silly saying he just wanted to look at Lauren for a moment, so he asked for food. What else could he do? Oh, that meatloaf Lauren made was amazing, wasn't it? Taylor went to the fridge and looked, pulling out a container of leftover meatloaf. Do you want a sandwich or mashed potatoes and gravy with it? We have leftovers of everything. Lauren always makes enough for 20 people. He shrugged. Everything sounds great. He wasn't sure if he could eat it all, but he'd try his best. Well, sit at one of the bar stools, and I'll nuke it for you. She got to work immediately, and though her hair and build were similar to Lauren's, her movements were completely different. She didn't have the casual ease in the kitchen that came with spending hours a day there. When it was all in the microwave, she turned to him. How are you enjoying your stay here? Is Lauren making you crazy? I heard she threatened to poison you again. He grinned at that. Lauren's threats are the highlight of my stay. I feel sad for the guests she's polite to. They're really missing out. And for some absurd reason, it was true. He really did like it when she called him a serial killer. Taylor shook her head, a slight grin on her face. I really do worry about the two of you and the way you treat each other. Don't hurt her feelings, all right? I know it doesn't show, but Lauren is really sensitive. Lauren? Justin gaped at Taylor. You're joking, right? That girl would spit me up and chew me out if I let her. I don't think that came out exactly right. Taylor laughed. It didn't, but I get your meaning. And we're talking about the same person. I think Mom and Dad's deaths hit her harder than any of the rest of us. She had just finished college and moved back home, and Mom was teaching her to cook. She frowned. Her whole life was an upheaval. The rest of us were devastated, but Lauren, well, she hides things, but it was different for her. He frowned. Knowing their parents had died recently and having it related to Lauren this way were two totally different things. I'll be careful then. Thanks. The microwave dinged then, and Taylor hurried over to get his food out, dumping it all into a to-go container, as she knew he liked. She pulled some of the cellophane-wrapped plastic silverware from a drawer and handed it all to him. I think there's some pie left from supper as well. He shook his head. This is more than enough. Thanks. No problem. We're always happy to share leftovers. Justin headed back to his room, thinking more about Lauren. Maybe he should try to have a real talk with her. Soon. But first, he needed to write another 4,000 words to finish out his workday. He yawned. It would be smart to get up earlier and start writing immediately, but it seemed like such an effort. He'd get it done. Soon. Chapter 8. Lauren's mind was going a mile a minute while she cooked breakfast the following morning. She decided to make French toast with Bear Lake raspberries and a cream cheese topping. Of course, she'd serve syrup, both maple and huckleberry, as well. Everything Dr. Lachille had said to her the previous night was rushing through her head. Lauren couldn't quit thinking about the possibility of getting matched to someone at the altar. It just sounded like a good solution, though she knew it wasn't the most conventional way to marry. Hopefully she could be matched with someone who lived near Bear Lake, and then she could keep working on discovering what she wanted from life. It would be perfect. When Kayla joined her in the kitchen, Lauren pursed her lips. She needed to talk to someone about it, and Kayla was always her go-to. The right way to get the words out was the hard part, and she decided to just spill her guts. "I'm thinking about doing something, and I want your take on it." "Of course," Kayla said, plucking a raspberry from the bowl and popping it into her mouth. "I'm always happy to give my opinion about anything and everything." "Well, you know that new couple that's staying here? The woman with the purple hair? Sam and Dr. Lachille. Those two are a riot." Kayla grinned, thinking about them. "Well, Dr. Lachille is a mental health counselor, but she's also a matchmaker. She has this business where she introduces people at the altar." Lauren looked up from whisking the eggs and milk together. "I'm thinking about doing it." "You would marry a man you'd never seen? Are you nuts?" "Oh, please, like we don't both know the answer to that." "I'm certifiable." Lauren shook her head. Dr. Lachille puts both people through a full battery of questions. She takes a whole day with anyone who asks for her services. So, I wouldn't really be marrying a stranger. I'd be marrying a man who was completely screened and matched for me. Does that make sense? Kayla leaned her elbows on the counter and stared at Lauren. "No, it doesn't make sense. Sounds to me like you've lost your mind. You know as well as I do that you and Justin need to at least try to make a go of it." "What are you talking about?" Lauren asked. "The man drives me absolutely insane. And I know I do the same to him." She ignored the flutters in her belly at the idea of her and Justin, but she couldn't even let Kayla see that. He didn't care about her, and she didn't need to be humiliated. "There's no way we'd both survive a date." "Well, you never know until you try it. I think you should maybe make something nice for him and the two of you sit down together and just have a nice chat." That would be a no. A big fat resounding no. "You have lost your mind, Kayla." "Well, sure, but you lost yours first." Lauren sighed. "I'm still thinking about at least talking to her about it." "What do I have to lose?" "You can't marry a stranger, Lauren. You just don't have it in you." "No, I think you need to look around you instead. You don't need a matchmaker." "What do you know about it?" Grumpily, Lauren got back to her mixing. She'd been sure Kayla would agree with her. "I never leave this kitchen. How am I supposed to meet someone? Soon, I'll be the only sister standing at this counter, living in this house. I love the house, but everyone else is moving on. Maybe I should too." Asterisk. Justin woke earlier than usual and headed to the kitchen as soon as he'd showered. He hadn't seen Lauren last night, even when he'd gone back out of his room to throw away the trash. He always threw it on the floor and waited for her to pick it up, but he'd wanted to see her. He'd needed to see her after killing her in his book the way he had. As he left his room, he sniffed deeply of the air, but he couldn't smell anything cooking yet. Was she sick? Were they going to have to bring something else in for breakfast? Just as he was about to turn the corner to the kitchen, he heard soft voices talking. He stopped, not really meaning to eavesdrop, but listening to what people said helped him with his books. At least that's what he told himself. And then he heard one of the sisters say something that made a thick ball of lead form in the pit of his stomach. "You can't marry a stranger, Lauren. You just don't have it in you. No, I think you need to look around you instead. You don't need a matchmaker." He couldn't believe she would even think of such a thing. She was young, strong, and beautiful. Why would she feel like she needed to marry a stranger? Then Lauren's reply came loud and clear, making him want to march right into the kitchen and shake her. He couldn't, of course, but he wanted to. He walked back to his room, grumbling under his breath the whole way. Prettiest girl I've ever met thinks she needs a matchmaker. She's lost her ever-loving mind. He walked into his room and slammed the door behind him, sitting at his desk, and scrolling up to the scene of her untimely death in his novel. After reading it, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. If she wanted to throw her life away, that was her prerogative. But he didn't have to watch her do it. Instead of going to find out when breakfast would be ready, he put his fingers on his keyboard and wrote a short scene from the killer's point of view. When he typed his killer's thoughts, he felt a bit better right away. No, she's not my normal kill, but she's about to do something mortally stupid. I have to kill her to save her from herself. He knew the words would probably be edited out in rewrites, but it still felt good to type them. By the time breakfast was ready, Lauren had made up her mind. Whether Kayla liked it or not, she was going to talk to Dr. Lachille about her matchmaking services. How could she do anything else? She couldn't sit around and wait for Justin, even if she was a teensy-weensy bit attracted to him. No, it was time for her to make things happen in her life, rather than letting life happen to her. She was determined, and she knew that was a good change from her usual attitude. When people started coming through for breakfast, she made their French toast and let them put what they wanted on it from the variety laying on the counter for them. She served glasses of juice, milk, and cups of coffee. And bacon. She'd made bacon to go with the French toast, and she knew everyone would enjoy that, because who didn't like bacon? Especially cooked perfectly crisp. She could eat it for every meal, and she knew her sisters were all bacon lovers as well. When Justin came to pick up his breakfast, he was cold. He didn't even make fun of her or call her names, and it freaked her out more than a little. Is something wrong? She asked as he took the takeout box she'd prepared for him. Why would there be something wrong? He asked, but his eyes looked dead, where they'd always been animated and full of life before. That's what I'm asking you. Lauren watched him carefully. The only thing wrong is you keep asking me what's wrong. You're going to make me mad, and then we'll have a self-fulfilling prophecy on our hands. Clutching the takeout container, he walked back toward his room, and left Lauren staring at his back. What was his problem? She'd have to clean his room later that day, and she wasn't looking forward to it. After all the guests had eaten, and Lauren had cleaned the kitchen and was reading over her menu for what to make for supper, Taylor joined her in the kitchen. It's almost noon. Tacos. Lauren loved that they'd made arrangements with Brandon to bring them tacos every single day he was out on the lake. It made her so happy. And right after tacos? Taylor asked with an eyebrow raised. Lauren took a deep breath. I know. We need to clean Mr. Mystery's room, and he's in a mood today. A mood? What kind of mood? Taylor looked perplexed. He always seems like he's on such an even keel to me. Only because you don't care what he's really up to. If you were trying to figure out the mystery that is Justin, you'd see the other sides as well, I'm sure. Taylor simply shrugged. Maybe. It was apparent to Lauren that her sister didn't really believe her, but that was all right. When she really figured out what he was doing, then they'd all understand. Well, I'll meet you there right after lunch. We have to get that taken care of. I'll be there with my combat suit on, Lauren said sarcastically. Taylor shook her head. You're a mess, Lauren. You tell me that every day. It's probably true, but you're getting repetitive. At lunch, they all sat around the table, eating their tacos and talking animatedly. I wish Amanda hadn't left, Lauren said. I like us all to be together, but as soon as we got Kayla back, Alyssa got married, and then Amanda went to Salt Lake. We can't all live under the same roof forever, Kayla said. I'm already looking for my next house to flip. Around building the deck, of course. Of course. Lauren sighed as she took another bite of her third taco. At least we'll always have tacos. She looked at Brandon in a panic. You're not planning on stopping with the taco boat just because your comic strip is syndicated, are you? Not at all. The taco boat is fun. Hard work, but fun hard work. I love when the kids run to the dock to buy the tacos for themselves. It's just a good experience. Brandon smiled at Taylor, taking her hand in his. Besides, Taylor wouldn't love me as much without my taco boat. Taylor blushed and shook her head, refusing to comment. She must have figured out that it would just lead to more teasing, and no one needed that. Lauren grinned. Just so we have tacos, I can be happy. There was a grunt from Justin, who had stayed silent up until that moment. What's your problem? Lauren asked him. I'm not sure that tacos really will keep you happy. You seem to feel like you need to figure out all my secrets, find something to do with your life, and marry a stranger. All of that together would make you happy, I guess. Taylor looked at Lauren in alarm. Marry a stranger? What does that mean? Lauren had no idea how Justin knew what she'd been thinking about, but at the moment, she needed to explain things to Taylor. So, you know Dr. Lashiel, who's staying here? Taylor was a lot less open-minded than Kayla, and Lauren was inwardly cringing, hating that she had to have this conversation with her sister in front of others. Taylor nodded. Yeah. She's a mental health counselor, but she's also a matchmaker. She introduces people at the altar after extensive psychological testing. I thought it might be good for me to see if she can find a good match for me. Lauren shrugged. It's no big deal. It would be if you actually went through with it and married a man you'd never met. You need to get that idea out of your mind, Lauren. I cannot imagine you doing something so foolhardy. Justin was nodding emphatically from the other end of the table. Exactly how I feel about it. Lauren glared at him. I'm sorry, but you don't get to have feelings about it. You left me standing in the middle of the dance floor while you went to find your next victim. You're done getting to have opinions or feelings about anything I do. Taylor's eyes widened. Lauren, he's a guest in our home. Oh, please. He's living here for months on end. He's our new psychopathic killer brother. She crinkled up the tinfoil her tacos had been wrapped in and got up from the table, going into the kitchen to throw her trash away. She called into the dining room, I'll get the hazmat suits ready so we can clean Mr. Thibodeau's room. Though why we're cleaning up after a serial killer, I will never know. I'm not a serial killer, Justin yelled back at her. And I'm leaving. I'll be back in a few hours. I need to get some fresh air. Lauren heard the front door slam, and she rubbed her hands over her face. The man was going to be the death of her, and who wanted to die at 22? Certainly not her. She grabbed the gloves they used to clean and several contractor bags. The cleaning caddy full of cleaning supplies was under the counter, and she mixed up another 10% bleach solution. It was too bad they couldn't just burn his room every week and start over. She got herself a bottle of water and drank it, trying to calm herself down. By the time Taylor joined her in the kitchen, she was ready. Asterisk. Justin woke earlier than usual, and headed to the kitchen as soon as he'd showered. He hadn't seen Lauren last night, even when he'd gone back out of his room to throw away the trash. He always threw it on the floor and waited for her to pick it up, but he'd wanted to see her. He'd needed to see her after killing her in his book the way he had. As he left his room, he sniffed deeply of the air, but he couldn't smell anything cooking yet. Was she sick? Were they going to have to bring something else in for breakfast? Just as he was about to turn the corner to the kitchen, he heard soft voices talking. He stopped, not really meaning to eavesdrop, but listening to what people said helped him with his books. At least that's what he told himself. And then he heard one of the sisters say something that made a thick ball of lead form in the pit of his stomach. "You can't marry a stranger, Lauren. You just don't have it in you. No, I think you need to look around you instead. You don't need a matchmaker." He couldn't believe she would even think of such a thing. She was young, strong, and beautiful. Why would she feel like she needed to marry a stranger? Then Lauren's reply came loud and clear, making him want to march right into the kitchen and shake her. He couldn't, of course, but he wanted to. He walked back to his room, grumbling under his breath the whole way. "Prettiest girl I've ever met thinks she needs a matchmaker. She's lost her ever-loving mind." He walked into his room and slammed the door behind him, sitting at his desk, and scrolling up to the scene of her untimely death in his novel. After reading it, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. If she wanted to throw her life away, that was her prerogative. But he didn't have to watch her do it. Instead of going to find out when breakfast would be ready, he put his fingers on his keyboard and wrote a short scene from the killer's point of view. When he typed his killer's thoughts, he felt a bit better right away. "No, she's not my normal kill, but she's about to do something mortally stupid. I have to kill her to save her from herself." He knew the words would probably be edited out in rewrites, but it still felt good to type them. By the time breakfast was ready, Lauren had made up her mind. Whether Kayla liked it or not, she was going to talk to Dr. Lachille about her matchmaking services. How could she do anything else? She couldn't sit around and wait for Justin, even if she was a teensy-weensy bit attracted to him. No, it was time for her to make things happen in her life, rather than letting life happen to her. She was determined, and she knew that was a good change from her usual attitude. When people started coming through for breakfast, she made their French toast and let them put what they wanted on it from the variety laying on the counter for them. She served glasses of juice, milk, and cups of coffee. And bacon. She'd made bacon to go with the French toast, and she knew everyone would enjoy that, because who didn't like bacon? Especially cooked perfectly crisp. She could eat it for every meal, and she knew her sisters were all bacon